We're hitting the Caribbean and we're hitting the Pacific. We've had 14.
Bro, they're doing NFL style red zone coverage on this shit, dude. Hell yeah, we're hitting everything. That's right. We got all these. Might as well use them. That's right, baby.
Thanks very much.
Overnight, there was another deadly strike on a suspected drug boat carrying 4. This one in the eastern Pacific, closer to Colombia. This brings to 90.
Venezuela has nationalized oil like Iran, the terrain of Vietnam, and the large military of Iraq. Who could wage a massive guerrilla campaign without Maduro like in Afghanistan? It's an amalgamation of all of America's biggest failures, and it is much closer in proximity to the United States. It's fantastic. What could go wrong? Except for virtually everything. Okay? It is a disaster in the making. It's a disaster from like a, pro-American perspective, right? It's obviously a major disaster from it's a major disaster in general, also from a caring about Venezuelan lives and caring about not having this level of destabilization in Latin America perspective as well. They wouldn't draft the 35-year-old, right? I mean, probably not. There is at this stage, who the actually thinks that this kind of American intervention will be a benefit, except for, I guess, like some of the Venezuelan chatters in here living in like Miami or something that have seen their neighbors and their family members get arrested and thrown into detention camps or shipped off to CCOT in El Salvador, who still think that this American government actually has their best interest in mind somehow. I don't know how brain broken you could potentially be that you look at the United States of America up forcibly the Venezuelan economy, causing mass destabilization, having a bunch of Venezuelans come to the United States of America, offering them temporary protected status, which Donald Trump actually reinforced on his way out, extended on his way out, only to use all of the hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans that come to the United States of America to find a better life for themselves as simple pawns in his political game, claiming that they're all terrorist drug dealers and rapists and shipping them to a totally separate third country. Like, that's how discardable you are if you're Venezuela in Trump's eyes. And it's not like he's hiding it. He's just openly stating it. And you're over here thinking like, no, that guy's actually going to be better. What do you want to see?
9, the number in these boat strikes with no evidence made public that these boats are carrying drugs. This comes as President Trump is now calling for a blockade of all sanctions.
I came back to Venezuela at the start of November. Let me tell you, the Venezuelan brainworm is real. People here cheer on an invasion and you tell them, but like imagine Caracas all destroyed and they just look at you like, yeah, you can point to Libya. You can point to Iraq. You can point to Afghanistan. You can point to so many different places where America has been able to successfully do this exact same thing. And how much better off they are now. Like, it's crazy.
Oil tankers, and there are dozens. It was just a little over a week ago we saw that dramatic seizure of an oil tanker off Venezuela's coast with an elite Coast Guard team rappelling onto the ship's deck. Oil exports are the lifeblood of Nicolas Maduro's government.
Well, they're suffering. What do you expect from them? They're going to suffer more. Like, what are you talking about? That's the whole point. The whole point is to try and stop additional suffering from people that are already suffering. This administration hasn't even done the necessary groundwork to make it seem as though they give about Venezuelans. At least in the past, when you had an inflow of refugees from the country whose economy you've purposely up and destabilized in an effort to foment some kind of popular resistance against the administration, and then the administration reacts with even further repression. This is normal part of the process. You wouldn't do a single person from the country that we're going to invade as a rapist criminal that we must deport instantly to a third country. Okay? America's doing that. And there's still Venezuelans that are like, nah, actually, that country would be better off. Our country would be better off They're not even doing a psyop, and people are like, I am willing. I didn't even get psyoped, and I'm still on board.
And President Trump has made no secret he wants him out of power. But with this military buildup, the attack on drug boats, and now this threat of more seizures, the risk of a dangerous confrontation in the standoff is increasing, Michael.
Yeah, it seems like it's really escalating, Martha. Martha, there's new controversies around the nomination for the leader of the Coast Guard.
Exactly, Michael. Admiral Kevin Lunday had been nominated to head the Coast Guard, but that nomination was frozen by Democratic Senators Tammy Duckworth and Jackie Rosen because the Coast Guard downgraded its listing, they say, of swastikas and nooses as merely potentially divisive in its workplace harassment policy. Instead of, again, labeling them as hate symbols, Senator Duckworth told ABC she had been assured by Lunday that he believes the swastikas and nooses are hate symbols, but the—
Excuse me, this is hurting military readiness. Excuse me, why can't they get swastika tattoos? I don't understand. It's just that's a symbol of peace, actually. I'll have you know, that's a Buddhist symbol of peace, ma'am. Oh God, what the are we doing, man? What are we doing?
new policy went into effect regardless, she said. But overnight, the Coast Guard put out a strongly worded statement saying it maintains a zero-tolerance policy toward hate symbols, extremist ideology.
Utterly irrelevant, but my friend who's an immigrant from Venezuela has been posting about how we shouldn't call it regime change, but democratic restoration and shit. I try not to question him on it since he has firsthand experience, but it feels weird. Yeah, you know what he doesn't have firsthand experience with? Living in an Iraq-style situation, okay? Living in a Libya-style situation, which I suspect he won't be living in regardless because he's in the United States of America now. Except he might actually be living in that situation or even in a worse situation when the Trump administration decides actually he's not worth living on U.S. soil, as they have already signaled towards. So I don't understand how these guys have any faith whatsoever. I understand why you lose faith, you lose confidence in your, in your local leadership, in your domestic leadership. I get that. I mean, I experienced that personally, like I said, with Erdogan in Turkey. But there has never been a situation where the conditions on the ground have improved after American intervention. Just it doesn't happen. And it's even different than the Cubans, okay? When people say, I really don't give a fuck why Cubans and Venezuelans who live in America say about this shit, except it's not even like the Cubans. The Miami Cuban mentality is there, right? For sure. Except because the Trump administration at least is not like threatening or can't really deport the 500,000 Cubans that live in Miami or whatever the number is. Because they've been here and they're second generation, third generation at this point. Like they were born in the United States of America. So that for now. But the Trump administration is actively signaling that they're going to denaturalize people, is actively signaling that they are working to, they've singled out Venezuelans living on U.S. soil as like the number one op. It doesn't make sense. Like it's not like they're saying like, oh, Venezuelans, you are our allies. You are welcome here. We are so sorry about what Maduro's done to you. They're literally saying you're rapist drug dealers and we're gonna send you to El Salvador. Were you initially a fan of Erdogan? No, of course not. I was libbed up as hell. Are you kidding me? Was the public sentiment positive for him overall? Yes, the public sentiment, obviously. Erdogan has always been able to maintain a 51% majority. That's just, something that he's been able to maintain. The Turkish elections are free. They're just not fair, I would say. Or like the elections that take place in Turkey are legitimate, and there is legitimately a 51% coalition, which is going away now. But we've been saying that for the past 20 fucking years. The difference, however, is that in the past, it was almost single-handedly in the hands of his own party. Then he had to build a coalition with the MHP, which is the ultra-nationalist party, also another CIA invention. Shouts out to NATO, shouts out to CIA. Obviously, Erdogan himself comes from the political background, like Erdogan's personal political background, and his movement is also the other side of the CIA NATO intervention in Turkey. The religious, like the Islamist movement is where he comes from, also propped up against Kurdish nationalists and socialists and all of these different movements in Turkey that were a real threat to America's interests as it was fighting against the USSR. But that's like these movements in the country that were primarily tasked with destroying any sort of like left flank political organizing in the country succeeded. Erdogan comes from that background. Him and FETÖ were like this, Fethullah Gülen initially. And then they separated when America decided, actually, we want even more control. Fethullah Gülen had developed a parallel state in Turkey already, had his tentacles in pretty much every facet of Turkish existence, from teachers, schools, all the way to judges, heads of police, people in the military. And they implemented a coup d'etat. It failed. And then Erdogan was able to harden his power and use the legitimate threat of a parallel state to his own, to further his own, to solidify his own power, basically. In any case, the reality of the matter is Erdogan is still far more preferable to an American puppet like Fethullah Gülen running the country. I said as someone who is no fan of Erdogan at all, and I'm sure many of the anti-Erdogan Turks in my chat would also agree to that. Absolutely zero people in Turkey will say Fethullah Gülen would have been a better leader for Turkey unless they're like super in Fethullah Gülen's cult. The point is there's always a worse op out there, okay? Yeah, Enes Kanter. Amına koyayım, Ohio'da bir Amerikalı'yla tanıştım, Türkçe biliyordu. Nereden öğrendin dedim. Adam FETÖ okuluna gitmiş. Burada da Fethullah okulu varmış. Tabii oğlum, her yerde var. Afrika'da da her yerde var. Amerikan parasıyla açıyorlar işte. The Fethullah Gülen movement was also propped up by America because the Wahhabist movement that was also propped up by the West was getting too radical for their taste. So they thought we could build an alternative Islamist movement that is more tolerant to Western intervention, that is more controllable by the West. And then they did that with the Fethullah Gülen movement. And that obviously did not work out very well for them anyway. All right. Let's continue. I don't know why I'm talking too much about Turkey today. I guess there are a lot of similarities with the way that with the warning signs, I guess, or with American intervention. But yeah, the U.S. Coast Guard statement on this stuff. I think like we should watch probably a video on the Monroe Doctrine, and then also a video on in an effort to like show you guys like the developments that have taken place long before this last action, and then on top of that, maybe do a deeper dive into like the Venezuelan resources in general.
Trump defending his strikes against suspected drug boats in the Caribbean during his prime time address. Listen.
They decimated the bloodthirsty foreign drug cartels. We did that all by ourselves with our people, and we're so proud of it because they were poisoning and destroying our population. Drugs brought in by ocean and by sea are now down 94%.
And a lot of action taken yesterday. Here's how the administration is ramping up their pressure against Maduro's regime. First off, let's take a look at the region. We have two places we're hitting, the Caribbean, and we're hitting the Pacific. We've had 14...
Bro, they're doing NFL style red zone coverage on this shit, dude. Hell yeah, we're hitting everything. That's right. We got all these bombs. Might as well use them. That's right, baby.
Hits in the Pacific. We've had 11 in the Caribbean. We're doing it. This is Venezuela. This is Colombia. Where are our assets? These are our ships. This is 15% of our armada. This is about 15,000 troops as well. They're located on these various bases in the region from Puerto Rico to Trinidad and Tobago. And this is where they plan on implementing the blockade. We've labeled about 80 separate tankers as blockade eligible to block the oil flow, to squeeze Maduro and get him out once and for all. I think over 80% or 85% of their total economic income comes from oil. If they can't get it out, something's got to give. Who's getting this discounted oil? Guess what? China, by a staggering amount. Yeah, we get some. If you look at our color over here, yeah, we get some. But this is who benefits. And that's why China, in our...
How dare they? I do like that Fox News is more honest about this assessment than, like, they're unintentionally more honest about American ambition here than BBC or any number of different, like, liberal analysts are. Because they're trying to basically propagandize hard and make their audiences get on board with this initiative at a time when, like, the overwhelming majority is not interested in military intervention in Venezuela, okay? Because we are living in a very different time than 2001. There's no more remnants of, like, the American boom of the 90s, okay? There's no hope left. There's been 20 fucking plus years of the global war on terror. Everyone is tired of this shit. Everyone knows the ways in which you try to propagandize for military action like this. And in the absence of a 9/11 style situation where Americans are going to get whipped up into a frenzy and a panic, they're not going to get invested. They're not going to get invested in the situation. The media environment is different. The amount of hope, or rather the social investment that the average American has about the American foreign policy initiatives is shattered. There is no investment whatsoever, right? There's no investment at all. Like, people just don't give a fuck about the ambitions of American empire. They don't have a lot of nationalistic fervor because there's not really a lot to look forward to in the American future. So for those reasons, I don't think a lot of Americans are invested in going to war with Venezuela, right? Having said that, in the absence of all of those other, motivating principles, they have to figure out a way. they have to figure out a way to sell this, and in an effort to sell it, they're getting brutally honest. Once again, though, why the fuck should the average American care about whether Venezuela is giving oil to China or not? Like, why is that a point of concern? If you are living in West Virginia, okay, and you haven't had a decent job in decades, and you're living in squalor, there's no rural hospitals in your immediate vicinity. You have to go to the veterinarian, to get immediate medical help. Many of your family members are deeply addicted to opioids. You've seen a bunch of them die to overdoses. Luckily, your family was able to hold on to a trailer that is the only thing that you have associated with your name. You turn on the television, and this fucking dipshit is like, Venezuela's selling oil to China. What level of investment do you have in this? Okay? Like, what are you... Oh, man. Wait, what? Venezuela's selling oil to China. We got to put an end to this now. Like, fuck you mean, dude? I'm sure there are people that see that and go, that's right, we got to do something about it. But the number of people that have that level of investment is diminishing, okay? That's it. That's it. You can't sell this. No matter how hard you fucking try. There's no holy war angle to it either. Like, what is the galvanizing principle here? What is the galvanizing factor here? That is the reason why I always say, like, when people talk about Israel being like this holy war, this religious war, I'm like, no, that's just a way to sell it to people. Okay? All war is around resources. Okay? But in order to get the average dumb fuck to be on board with one side over the other, you have to sell them on it. And if you just turn around and say, no, this is so that, like, Chevron executives can turn higher profit margins next year. If I'm not exactly feeling the impact of this great American decade of prosperity, I'm going to be like, I don't give a fuck about the Chevron CEO. Who gives a suck my dick? Do you see what I mean? Now, of course, there's an entire separate conversation to be had here where it's like, do we even need the consent of the masses to be able to initiate wars such as this one? I think yes. You still need at least a decent percentage of the population to be on board. But with the Trump administration's allure diminishing, with the MAGA cult experiencing the struggles that they are continuously experiencing under the Trump administration after they bought into it, it's even more difficult. It's even more difficult to get them on board with, at least if they had treats or if they had something to look forward to, they would probably be more invested in whatever Trump is telling them is going to be the next territory we must conquer.
Our backyard, getting discounted oil does not work for us, does not work for our national security, and certainly doesn't work for, but does work for one country, and that is Venezuela, led by Maduro. So let's check in with national security expert Rebecca Heinrichs about where this is going. Rebecca, your thoughts about the president's mission and how he's approaching it.
Well, look, Brian, you just did a great job at explaining that we're actually doing two things that are good for the United States' interest here. Not only do we squeeze the Maduro regime, which of course has this symbiotic relationship with the drug cartels, but we're also diminishing Venezuela's illicit system of exporting oil into these other adversaries.
The funny thing is that you can tie all of this up to gaming and such for normies to understand. Yes, for the gamers, the PC you saved up for now costs $1,000 more. Different components are even more costly. Okay, you're never going to get that upgrade, and you're never going to be able to get a new console because of the tariffs. Okay, that shit's more expensive too. The games are more expensive as well. Donald Trump did that. And on top of that, if you thought, oh, well, this kind of consolidation was going to be good because Gamer Pass, Microsoft mergers were actually going to lead to a cheaper product down the line. Nope, that didn't happen either. There's never been an instance where corporate consolidation has ever fucking led to cheaper prices in the long run or better service and better products in the long run. It's entirely in the hands of the mega corporation in the aftermath of said merger on whether or not they choose to keep prices low. And why the fuck would they choose to keep prices low when in the absence of market competition? They're, of course, not going to keep the prices low. I bought 96 gigs of DDR5 RAM for $220 6 months ago. The same RAM now costs $1,070. Shit is fucked. No, you don't understand though. The AI boon is going to save all of us. And that's what these guys need to focus on, okay? They need to do B2B. They need to sell all their product to these data centers. Also, those data centers need to destroy your water supply. Those data centers also need to greatly hike up. You need to subsidize with your newly skyrocketing electricity bills. You are subsidizing those data centers. I don't know, man. It's so fucking crazy. It's so crazy that like every part of this sucks and you get nothing out of it. Like nothing. It's your work and the things that you type out on the internet that is like fueling this AI takeover. And its primary purpose is to displace you in the labor market if you even have a desk job still, right? If you have one of those fucking coveted laptop jobs, which are seemingly the only remaining jobs, where the wages are super stagnant, the benefits are stagnant, getting worse year over year, okay? Like, they are looking to basically cut you out of that deal as well, and they're stealing whatever your output is on the internet to make the AI thing work. You're basically training your robotic replacement. It's devastating. It's just an insane situation. My mom works for a phone company. They're asking central office where the signal originates to go on backup generators to keep data centers running. It's happening all over Texas. Yeah. In your day-to-day, you're subsidizing these data centers with your energy bill that has increased ginormously. Okay. And in your workplace experience, your job is your robotic overlord to replace you down the line. Where do we go from here? How is this sustainable? Where will it stop? Will it stop when there's like, I don't know, 10,000 people that get to experience the world in all of its glory, and then everyone else is their slaves? Is that how we do it? Is that when it'll be enough? Everything is handled by AI. You got no wages. You got no benefits. You got no compensation, no hope for a better future. You're living in fucking squalor, and you're basically hoping that you can be a slave to the 10,000 ordained multi-billionaires. That's your future. That's what we're looking at.
Of the United States. Another country that it sells oil to is the Iran, and they do this to evade sanctions. And then Iran refines the oil and then can export it to China, which has an insatiable demand for oil. So clearly, the Trump.
Yeah, what are they doing with that oil, by the way? Like, just walk through this process. So Venezuela sends the oil to Iran. Iran refines it, sells it to China. Okay. What is China doing with that oil? Ooh, scary Chinese things. Building our shit, dumbass. Building the entire world shit. Manufacturing 30% of everything that we're getting. Like, what are we talking about? What do you think is going on here? And it's a system that we designed, for the record. Like, what is this fucking framing? Like, oh, you don't understand. Venezuela is indecently selling its oil to Iran to refine. Iran is then indecently selling the oil to China. And then China is indecently using the oil to make plastics that we consume, that we have seemingly an endless appetite for. And as a matter of fact, if the low-cost Chinese goods weren't flowing into the country, we would probably have a people's revolt. How dare they do this? How dare they try to survive in a system that we have designed? How dare all of these other foreign adversaries try to continue existing, even though we have forcibly written them out of the equation, and try to punish anyone and everyone that even collaborates.
Administration has said, look, we've already sanctioned these tankers.
Yeah, dude, it's going to nothing bad. Yeah, no, you're right. Chinese style oil is actually very different than the way other countries utilize the oil. Yeah. Hey, by the way, where the fuck's your phone made, dumbass, that you're tuning into twitch.tv over? Like, there's not a single thing that you touch that isn't at some point manufactured in fucking China. And you're over here being like, well, when the Chinese get the Chinese style oil from Iran, it's actually being used in an indecent way. Yeah, so your fucking fat pig-larded ass can enjoy your fucking treats. I said they do nothing bad. Why do you assume it's sarcasm? Because you didn't say, because of the way you presented it, okay?
Now we're going to really execute the sanctions enforcement by carrying out this blockade, which is all they're really doing. This is just carrying out what we've already done by sanctioning these illicit tankers.
So Maduro basically is being protected.
Iran turns the oil into transgender enriched uranium.
Not even by his own military, but by the Cuban intelligence. We know we also would love to squeeze Cuba, have been going after them since the 60s. This could really be their death knell if Venezuela switches and becomes an ally of ours.
Well, that's right. And then also, you know,
yeah, any moment now, we're just going to fucking destroy. That's it. Any moment now, we're going to destroy China, okay? It's happening. Oh, yeah. No, this is it. This is the death knell. We're gonna destroy Venezuela, then we're gonna destroy Cuba. I don't know why, because they're just kind of there, and it's really fucked up that they're kind of there existing. And then we're also gonna destroy China as well. It's just funny because like this kind of posturing, this kind of like open saber rattling never happens in the Chinese media of like against Japan, right? When the Japanese prime minister says like, oh, we're going to reinvade Taiwan like we did not that long ago. You know, that's like the only time where you hear the Chinese government say something even remotely similar. Never against America, okay? And it's understandably a sore spot for you know, people who probably still remember the Japanese occupation and learned about it in school. But beyond that, could you imagine if the Chinese government spoke about America in this way? Like, imagine a world where the Chinese government was like, yeah, we need to fucking dethrone America, the empire. We need to destroy them. The treatlerites must suffer. No more treats to America. We must bomb American ally boats over and over again, everywhere around the world. I'm trying to imagine, but I don't know Chinese. It's true.
It's if you pressure the Maduro regime so much, you mentioned that this is about 85% of the revenue that comes in that supports the Maduro regime, you're going to immediately have further crises. That's already a fragile government system for the Venezuelan people.
Why is this the only instance where there's no reporting on the Israeli position on this? I know it's quite anti-Semitic that they're not talking about little old Israel's position in all of this, you know? In the periphery of all this, they'd love to take away one more Iranian ally after they already lost Syria.
They're going to feel that pressure even more, and they're going to blame Maduro, and there's going to be more pressure to push Maduro to leave. So at this point, Brian, I don't see at all how Maduro survives this. I think he's going to be gone. And the question then remains is how do we get a pro-American opposition forces in there to replace him in a stable way to get control over that? Again, over all of those other militant people who support Maduro, they're going to have to leave too and get pro-democracy people in place instead.
And if you look at the boat strikes, there's been 26.
We're gonna get pro-democracy people instead. Oh, brother, where have I heard that before? Pro-American and pro-democracy people. They'll welcome us as liberators, okay? Oh my God, they're gonna be so stoked when we dethrone Saddam. They will love it. They're gonna be so stoked. I mean, look, we came, we saw, he died, right? Right? Everyone is so stoked in Libya. They're so excited. We are going to win the hearts and minds of the Venezuelan population any day now. Yeah. The only country that gets to be sovereign and have sovereign rights is the United States, and there are scores of right-wingers in Venezuela, Iran, and elsewhere who are content to live in that kind of world. Yeah, the exact same arguments were trotted out by the British when Iran nationalized oil in the 1950s. It doesn't belong to the people who live on the land from which it is extracted. No, it somehow belongs to the people who sought to steal it from under them. The only country that gets to be sovereign and have sovereign rights is the United States, and there are scores of right-wingers in Venezuela, Iran, and elsewhere who are content to live in that kind of world. Straight up. And we hear from them all the time. As a matter of fact, it's the only type of people that we hear from in Western news. Yeah. The American sweat in oil industry in Venezuela is tyrannical expropriation. What do words mean anymore? Nothing. Okay? It feels like parody, dude. It feels like fucking parody. Venezuelan oil was promised to us 3,000 years ago. What are we doing? Venezuelan oil and land was promised to us 3,000 years ago. Okay? Excuse me. That's my oil that you seemingly expropriated. That's unacceptable. This is the greatest crime of all crimes.
Overall, it's estimated that 98 are dead because of that. For the most part, the American people in this country is polarized, but 47% are in favor of these strikes, especially if the president outlines specifically what it could mean for America. But they are focused on our own economy.
Having U.S. military use deadly force on drug trafficking boats from Venezuela, the opposition went from 53% to 47%. Wow. Yeah, show the other one. Show the next number.
In the big picture, do you believe that the president's under pressure?
Oh, wait, no, never mind. That's the only favorable number, seemingly favorable number that they can actually present is that, Americans seemingly are fine with death and destruction. It went the other way. Sorry. But even though you read it backwards, the opposition went up. Sorry. The opposition went up now 53% from November 2025, where it was at 47%. And the thing is, this is the most favorable numbers that they have. Okay? This is the most favorable numbers that they have on the Venezuela issue. Okay? The opposition went up marginally. Okay? The opposition went up marginally. But that is the most popular position that the administration has. Think about how fucking insanely unpopular it is. Yeah, they put the graphic backwards to dupe me and others, but it doesn't matter because I know the actual fucking numbers. And the actual numbers on going to war with Venezuela are horrifyingly unpopular. So this is the best it's going to get. Okay? This is the best it's going to get. That's the reason why they're showing these numbers only, where there is at least like a close to 50-50 percentage on Americans and their appetite for death and destruction on small boat strikes that just seemingly murder people off the coastline of Venezuela. Okay? Do you understand? So the very fact that this right here, a question that is so heavily biased in its framing that straight up fucking lies, having U.S. military use deadly force on drug trafficking boats from Venezuela, the implication that these drug trafficking boats are at the U.S. coastline. Are you comfortable with blowing up? Are you comfortable with using our Navy in blowing up random fucking boats off the coastline of Venezuela? Even that is barely at a 50-50 split, with the opposition winning over, the majority actually being in, the majority over actually opposing this kind of thing. And that being the best possible number you have, it's terrible.
Economy. In the big picture, do you believe that the president's under pressure, like Lindsey Graham indicated 48 hours ago, to make sure Maduro gets out? Because if he's able to survive, he will look as if he stared down the superpower of the world.
Well, I think that's exactly where we are. I mean, essentially, the president has brought so much military power to bear into the region that I think the only option at this point is to keep a credible threat of military force, at least airstrikes against Maduro. But again, that's going to require a hand-in-glove cooperation with Congress. Congress wants to crush the drugs coming into the United States, but it has to understand how the pressure on Maduro fits into that larger picture, and Congress wants to be brought into this. So I would highly encourage the president to come in, continue the briefings, and make sure they've got the support of the Congress to do this.
Right, absolutely, and then we'll see what happens. The president wants this done by Christmas. Real quick, when people say, I worry about Libya when it comes to regime change, I worry about Iraq.
Yeah, come on, give us a quick note on how this time it'll be different, please. Can you give us a quick note on how this time it'll be awesome and how this time it'll be different, please? Come on now.
When it comes to regime change, is this different?
Well, I think it's different because you always want to worry about what's going to replace it. Is there going to be something worse? But Maduro has been so catastrophic to the Venezuelan economy, to the people.
Yeah, as opposed to the what? Argument against Gaddafi, as opposed to the argument against Saddam. You said the same thing there. Of course, the difference there is that was far away. This is not far away at all. This is in our backyard. Not to use that same colonial framework here before the wokers get mad at me. Okay. You know, this time it's different. Yeah, it is. It's worse. It's worse. TLDR News did a good primer
on Tuesday,
for why
US
Trump wants
President
Venezuela's oil.
Donald Trump announced.
Oh my God, even the fucking libs are actually out to get Donald Trump on this one. That's kind of wild. Seeing like otherwise liberal outlets that are oftentimes very much on board with American empire actually take this like critical tone, it does feel a little different. I'll be honest. I mean, I don't know exactly how aggressive they are, but I'm glad to have some critical liberal
that the US would be imposing an oil embargo on Venezuela, deploying its navy off the Venezuelan coast to prevent sanctioned oil tankers from exporting Venezuelan crude.
The thing that these guys do, for the record, even when they're critical of Trump's ambitions here, at least from what I've seen on like NPR and all these other outlets, even when they're somewhat critical, they still take this normalizing tone where they'll talk about, well, these are sanctioned oil tankers. They don't actually investigate where the sanctions are coming from, the validity of the sanctions, or the validity of American actions in general. They just take for granted that, like, when America decides you're sanctioned, we get to keep that oil. When America decides you're rendered ineligible for global trade, then that's normal. Let's not consider the impact that has on the Venezuelan economy, for example. Let's not consider the impact that has on the population. That is the part of that's the part of the process that they just like seemingly take for granted, and I don't like that at all. And I've heard that so much from NPR, and I've heard that so much from like BBC and all these other places where they just basically go, of course, America sanctioned Venezuelan oil. Of course, they're not allowed to fucking trade with Iran, and then by way of trade with Iran, have the Iranian refined Venezuelan oil go to China. So in that regard, there is this capitulation. There is this normalization of American actions.
Trump was cheered on by hawks in Washington, who argued that an embargo would heap yet more pressure on Maduro, given his regime's near total reliance on oil revenues. Although we should note it'll probably exacerbate Venezuela's appalling economic crisis, and the regional migration crisis emanating from the country. Within that Truth Social post, however, Trump also seemed to claim that Venezuela had, in some sense, stolen America's oil and land. Unsurprisingly, this sparked some speculation that the real motive, or at least one of the motives, behind Trump's pressure campaign against Venezuela might be getting America's hands on Venezuela's enormous and relatively untapped oil supplies. This isn't actually the first time Trump has made this sort of suggestion. In 2023, at a rally in South Carolina, Trump said that, quote, "When I left, Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken over. We would have kept all that oil." And in 2020, John Bolton, Trump's national security advisor between 2018 and 2019, claimed Trump told him that Venezuela was, quote, "really part of the United States." So, in this video, we're going to explain why at least some people think Trump's campaign in Venezuela is really about oil, and how this all speaks to a long-standing contradiction in what we might call Trump's oil policy. If you love staying informed and want some of the best reporting on YouTube, then subscribe and ring the bell for more. So to understand why people think this is all really about oil, you need a bit of context. In short, Venezuela has a lot of oil. In fact, according to data from the US Energy Information Administration, or EIA, Venezuela has quite literally the world's largest oil reserves, with something like 300 billion barrels worth of proven reserves, about 40 billion barrels more than Libya, and more than triple that of Russia. However, Venezuela isn't anywhere near as big a player in global oil markets as you might thus expect. According to the EIA, for instance, Venezuela is currently producing something like 1 million barrels of oil a day, roughly a tenth of the three big oil producers, the US, Saudi Arabia and Russia, who are all producing more than 10 million barrels a day. This makes Venezuela only the 18th biggest oil producer in the world, in between 17th placed Libya and 19th placed Angola, who both have only a fraction of the reserves that Venezuela does. Similarly, according to CEIC data, Venezuela only exports about 650,000 barrels a day, compared to about 6 million barrels a day for Saudi Arabia and about 4.5 million barrels a day for Russia. You get the idea. Despite its massive reserves, Venezuela isn't actually a big player in oil markets at the moment. So, what explains this apparent underperformance? Well, we see at least 3 reasons. First, Venezuela pretty heavy. For context, when oil is pumped out the ground, it's an unhelpful mix of different hydrocarbons that can't really be immediately used for anything, hence why it's called crude oil, which thus needs to be separated into usable petroleum products, like gasoline and diesel. However, not all crude oil is created equal. Crude oils have different viscosities or gravities. Heavy crude oil is more viscous, while light crude oil is thinner. Importantly, heavy crude...
Yeah, it's the Venezuelan oil is the sour, shitty, difficult to process heavy crude oil.
Is more difficult to separate and process into usable petroleum products, especially high-value products like gasoline and jet fuel. Unfortunately for Maduro and co., Venezuelan crude is some of the heaviest in the world, making it more difficult and expensive to refine.
We don't even want it, really. We don't even want it. Look away, please. It's the type of oil that nobody wants. It's more of a burden, really, if we were to secure such disgusting, shitty, tasteless oil.
Second, Venezuela's oil industry has suffered from chronic mismanagement. Venezuelan politicians and officials...
Yeah, we're doing this to help Venezuelan oil, honestly. We're putting them on a diet. Yeah, your oil looks heavy. Let me hold it for you, Venezuela, please.
Have long treated Venezuela's state-owned oil company, PDVSA, as a sort of corrupt piggy bank, extracting money from the company that should really either have been spent on improving Venezuela's public services or reinvested back into Venezuela's decrepit oil infrastructure. Third, sanctions haven't helped. Since really 2019, PDVSA has been under a strict US-led sanction regime that has made it difficult for the company to tap international capital markets or export oil. Sanctions have obviously had a direct impact on Venezuelan exports, but they've also reduced...
Yeah, Venezuelans are too barbaric to figure out what to do with the revenues generated from that shitty terrible oil that we don't even want, really. And I think it should be left up to more productive, smarter, bigger brained hands to actually take that revenue and redistribute it to the pockets of like 10,000 people total. Okay? This would be a better way. This would be a better way to distribute that revenue. I think resource management is not the Venezuelan government's best. It's not their strongest aspect. So I think, yeah, we need to put a puppet. We need to install a puppet that will then take those revenues and distribute it back directly to a hand-selected few oil and gas giants that are major shareholders. I think that would be much better for Venezuelans overall.
PDVSA's oil production, because the company can't really attract international capital to fund the necessary investments in Venezuela's oil industry. Trump might be thinking that if the US essentially took over Venezuela's oil industry, whether by replacing Maduro with a more pliant government, or, as Trump implied on Truth Social, literally claiming Venezuela's oil for the US, all these problems could be easily solved. The US could remove sanctions and provide capital for the much-needed investments in Venezuela's oil infrastructure. The US could also help with refining Venezuela's inconveniently heavy crude. Many of America's oil refineries, especially those on the Gulf Coast, are actually designed to process heavy crude from countries like Mexico and Venezuela. This is why the so-called shale boom in the US hasn't made the US energy independent, as both Obama and Trump claimed it would. Most of the oil produced in the US is produced via fracking, and is generally pretty light. Frustratingly for America, its refineries were set up to process heavier crudes from Western Hemisphere producers.
I mean, it's just kind of sitting there, right? I mean, do you not want those refineries to refine some heavy crude? Like what? It's just kind of sitting there. What are we supposed to do? Not fucking refine some heavy crude? See? They're asking for it. I mean, our refineries are sitting there looking pretty. If you don't use it, you lose it. I feel like this is a win-win, you know? This is a win-win-win. It's very frustrating that they're just kind of sitting there ready to molest Venezuelan heavy crude.
Like Canada, Mexico, and Venezuela, which means that a lot of American oil is actually exported to be refined elsewhere, and the US still imports heavier crude from abroad to be refined and then consumed in the US. Revitalizing Venezuela's oil industry would thus be good business for not just US supermajors like Chevron, which have outstanding operations in Venezuela, but also American refiners. It would also probably bring down gas prices, because more Venezuelan production means more oil supply and thus, all else being equal, lower oil prices. This would be great news for Trump domestically, given that lower prices at the pump would help tamp down inflation, which has become a real political vulnerability for him lately. However, we should say that lower prices probably wouldn't be good for American producers.
There's that angle as well, but also on top of that, while the price of an oil barrel has gone down throughout the Trump regime, other prices have not also gone down alongside the price of oil. Like the only thing that you see is the price of gas at the gas pump going down, but you don't actually see all the other parts of the economy that impact CPI go down alongside the price of an oil barrel.
Global oil prices are already pretty low by historical standards. Until Trump announced his oil embargo, Brent crude futures were actually trading below $60 a barrel, the lowest they've been since the pandemic. Unfortunately, US producers need relatively high prices to turn a profit. Estimates vary, but most analysts generally think prices have been at about $60 a barrel for American shale producers to just break even. And there have already been a slew of reports suggesting US producers are tightening their belts, with the Energy Information Administration now predicting a drop in American output next year. This speaks to long-standing tension in Trump's oil policy. Higher prices are good for America's domestic oil industry, which Trump's a big fan of, but unpopular with his voters, who really don't like inflation. Now, as a viewer of TLDR News, we know that you're a details person. So
What is this? Is the rest of this just like a promo? All right. Well, that's a somewhat of a liberal analysis on it. But there is a new Al Jazeera video that came out. How dangerous is the U.S. standoff with Venezuela? An inside story.
Program, I'm Fully Thibault. Venezuela is on edge. The government of President Nicolas Maduro, those who want to see him ousted, and the country's people suffering and political crises are all wondering what's next. After deploying U.S. military forces nearby, U.S. President...
Yeah, there's a warrant out for the Brown shooter. We're going to be looking at that in a little bit. Don't worry. Luckily, the law enforcement was able to figure things out.
Donald Trump has now warned that sanctioned oil tankers will be blocked from leaving Venezuela, cutting off another source of revenue. Russia and China have both reaffirmed their support for their ally. Beijing has accused the U.S. of bullying, while the Kremlin calls for restraint. Trump's new national security strategy declares the U.S. must control the entire Western Hemisphere politically, economically, and militarily. What that might mean for Venezuela has added to tensions in Caracas and the region. So where is this all headed? And how do people in Venezuela see the unfolding situation? We'll talk to our guests shortly, but first, this report from Alexandra Baez.
The United States has been escalating pressure on Venezuela for months. It tightened the screws again this week, with President Donald Trump ordering a total and complete blockade on sanctioned oil tankers entering and leaving Venezuela.
Kremlin calls for restraint is a funny statement, especially considering what they're doing in Ukraine. But the United States of America is the only country on the planet where they could do that against, and it would still be like somewhat understandable. Obviously, Chinese calls for restraint are seemingly from a much better moral position overall. But like, there's only two places where you can technically say, hey, man, you're doing a bunch of craziness, and it's unironically valid. It's America and Israel.
He accused President Nicolas Maduro's government of using oil...
By the way, it's not exactly different on our end either, because America calls for restraint against the Kremlin all the time.
...oil revenue to finance drug terrorism and of stealing oil and land from America.
Getting land, oil rights, whatever we had, they took it away because we had a president that maybe wasn't watching, but they're not going to do that. We want it back. They took our oil rights. We had a lot of oil there. As you know, they threw our companies out, and we want it back.
The blockade threatens Venezuela's crumbling economy. It has the world's largest proven oil reserves, and the U.S. is the second largest buyer after China. The U.S. buys 50% of the country's total exports, mostly crude, the government's main source of revenue. Years held back efforts to modernize Venezuela's armed forces. Currently, it has 123,000 active personnel and 8,000 reservists, and relies on China, Russia, Iran, and Cuba for weapons and training. Added to those is the Bolivarian militia, an estimated 300,000 armed fighters based locally throughout communities. Maduro has remained defiant, denouncing Trump's blockade as warmongering.
Today, I spoke with the UN Secretary General. We spoke at length, and I laid out to him what the scale of aggression and threats have been. So Venezuela's oil belongs to them. The Venezuelan minerals and gold belong to them. And what we've never heard before, that the Venezuelan land belongs to them and that we must give them back immediately. Honestly, it's a warlike and colonial intention.
Washington has deployed its largest presence of U.S. forces in the Caribbean in decades. More than 15,000 American soldiers, fighter jets, a Navy destroyer with guided missiles, and the world's largest aircraft carrier. Since September, it's bombed dozens of vessels in the Caribbean and Pacific, killing about 100 people it accuses of smuggling drugs. Both China and Russia have voiced support for Venezuela.
China opposes all acts of unilateral bullying and supports countries in defending their sovereignty and national dignity. Venezuela has the right to independently develop mutually beneficial cooperation with other countries.
We see tensions escalating in the region. We see it as potentially very dangerous. Venezuela is our ally and partner. We call on all parties in the region to show restraint in order to avoid any unpredictable developments.
With each step, Observers are wondering if the countries are moving closer to war. Alexandra Byers, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
I don't know if this goes beyond finger wagging in general, but yeah, the Inside Story is not as exciting, I think, because there's like all these different takes in it. There's got to be a more, where is it? There's got to be a more interesting one, like a more concise. Oh, here it is. Trump, Venezuela, and the new Cold War with China.
When it comes to the art of diplomacy, there's a number of ways countries talk to each other. There's economic diplomacy. For example, I give you money and you give me oil. You know what I mean. Cultural diplomacy. I give you Louis Armstrong playing jazz at the pyramids and you let me move this oil through your...
How is this not seen as hypocritical by China considering his posture with Taiwan? Brother, that is fucking insane. How many fucking fishermen, how many Taiwanese boats has China blown up off their own coastline, ironically enough? Because, you know, the closest Taiwanese land is like what? A fucking 100 kilometers off the Chinese coastline? Like, what are we talking about? It's not even a question. There is no comparison. Also, the American government considers Taiwan to be a part of China. Okay? Just remember, at most, you could maybe say, well, look at what China's doing to the Philippines, right? To the Filipino boaters, to the Filipino fishermen. And even in that situation, could you imagine if the American Coast Guard was actually spraying Venezuelan boats with water cannons as opposed to nuking them out of orbit? There's nothing that you can compare that America does that is even remotely close to what China does. Okay?
Canal. And then there's this.
Another lethal blow against suspected drug traffickers.
The U.S. striking another alleged drug vessel in the waters off Venezuela.
Gunboat diplomacy. Give me your oil or else.
Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken it over. We would have gotten all that oil.
This is how the U.S. has dealt with Venezuela for decades. But Donald Trump has turned that dial way up. It started with missile strikes on speedboats, then an aircraft carrier moved into the Caribbean. US troops deployed in Panama, and CIA operatives were sent to Caracas. President Trump says it's a war on drugs. That Venezuelan leader, Nicolas Maduro, is a so-called narco-terrorist who's flooding the US with cocaine, mass violence, and sex trafficking. But it's starting to look like a war on Venezuela.
Millones de campesinos y campesinas estén preparados y defender la República Bolivariana de Venezuela.
So is this really about narcotics?
Venezuela's not involved in the drug trade because the UN says they're not involved in the drug. I don't care what the UN says. The UN doesn't know.
This man is also the most responsible for all this shit. Okay? I just need you to understand. This has been his baby since he got in office. Okay? Marco Rubio came into power because he wanted to suck off Israel and he wanted to blow up every Latin American country he possibly could. And now, as the head of the State Department, he's getting his wishes. And it's not just about Venezuela, it's also about Cuba as well. He wants to blow up Venezuela, he wants to blow up Cuba. He wants to completely dominate every single Latin American country.
What they're talking about.
Yeah, 99 to 1 Senate confirmation vote, including Bernie Sanders, for the record. Remember that.
Even about Venezuela or something else, like China and its growing influence in Latin America.
Maduro offered us a dominant stake in Venezuela's oil, gold, and mineral wealth and promised to cut ties with Russia and China.
So how far is Trump willing to go? And will China back down? I'm Mohammed Hasan, and this is Pinch Point, where politics and geography collide. Let's play a game. Can you guess who countries in Latin America? The US or China? Let's start with Brazil. Answer, China. What about Mexico? Answer, the US. Chile, China. Peru, China. Argentina, China. As you go across the region, it's clear that China has been making big moves. In the last few years, China's become South America's biggest trade partner, usurping a role the US has fought to maintain for more than 200 years. And it's always been very protective of that.
Yeah, that's called trade maxing, baby. Get with the fucking program. This is true. This is the reason. Mohammed Hasan is absolutely right.
All the way back in
Unblock me on
1823,
Twitter.
U.S.
I
President
wonder what
James
kind of
Monroe
dumb fuck
issued the
bullshit this
Monroe
person
Doctrine,
presented.
a warning to European
Oh,
powers
God.
to abandon their colonial pursuits in the Western Hemisphere. Then, in 1904, President Theodore Roosevelt amended that doctrine,
I feel like I might have made the right decision.
giving the United States power to intervene militarily in Latin American countries. The Roosevelt corollary kick-started America's view of itself as world police, and over the next century began to flex its growing military power. In the 20th century alone, it sent its armed forces to Peru, Nicaragua, Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala. It occupied parts of Haiti, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Panama, Colombia, and it helped overthrow governments in Argentina, Chile, El Salvador, Bolivia, Brazil. Honestly, it's easier to name a country that wasn't shaped by US intervention, maybe Costa Rica. Whenever a country got too cozy with a rival, Team USA stepped in to protect its interests.
Damn, that's crazy. What the fuck? What the hell? I don't get it. That dude was an ex-IDF VTuber? Wait, really? Oh, that's awesome.
Which, throughout the 20th century, can be summed up in one word: oil. And setting a
You blocked me because I called you anti-Semitic and because I served in the IDF. If I blocked you on Twitter, it's not that serious. Like, I didn't think about it at all. Okay, I promise you. But also, why the fuck do you want to be unblocked?
The top of this region is a country with more anywhere else in the world: Venezuela. Back in the day, the two countries were pretty friendly, and US companies had...
This person is trying to make a name for themselves in the admin sphere. They're farming you for a video right now. Wait, you served in the IDF, you called me anti-Semitic, and you're trying to make a name for yourself in the Asmongold sphere? How do you feel about Asmongold talking about how base Nick Fuentes is? Serious question. Who do you think is a bigger anti-Semite? Put that in the video. You promote terrorist propaganda. You think I'm a bigger threat? I'm a bigger anti-Semite than Nick Fuentes. Okay. No, he's a bigger idiot, to be fair. Huh. Okay. They're a white person who says the N-word regularly on Twitter. I do love this kind of stuff, where someone who I guess is a white Israeli person that says the N-word will be like, honestly, Nick Fuentes is a little bit anti-Semitic, but you're a bigger threat than he is, even though I'm not even anti-Semitic. I'm just anti-Zionist. I'm anti-Israel. Not something that I hide at all, right? But it is pretty funny. Like, it's the logical conclusion of just being only invested in the continuation of death and domination that Israel brings about the entire region. Okay. Are you allergic to normal haters? Brother, it is not my fault that I rarely have normal haters, okay? I bring a very strange vibe, I guess, that seemingly is catnip for the most insane type of person. Israeli IDF veteran, lolly VTuber, who says the N-word and thinks that Nick Fuentes is less of a threat to Jews than someone like myself. Like, how do you write that? How do you explain that? God damn. Pick a struggle, brother.
Challenged access to Venezuelan oil fields, but that all changed in 1999 when a revolutionary socialist government led by Hugo Chavez seized power. Fiercely anti-American, Chavez.
Sweetheart. Wait, this is the thing I don't get. It's like, first of all, even though that's not the case, okay, even though that is not the case, how the fuck do you explain your worldview if you are anti-black racist, saying the N-word, transphobic, have a lolly VTuber account, and you're also on top of that going, well, this is the one kind of bigotry that we must not broach. Like, why do you think Nazi sentiment, like actual anti-Semitism, not anti-Zionism, of the likes I represent, but actual anti-Semitism is growing? Do you not realize that you're kind of playing a role in this? Being a Zionist means believing in the existence of the state of Israel. If you want us to exist, if you don't want us to exist, then you're anti-Zionist, which is anti-Semitic. Yeah, I know. I've heard this stuff before. I'm talking about something different, and I don't think you're understanding. By the way, the reason why you're being held back on the auto mod is because the ADL made it so that it's a terms of service violation to even bring up the word Zionism in this chat. just so you understand. And it's not like some heavy-handed censorship that we're implementing. But you're not considering what I'm saying. If you're running around being bigoted to all these other different groups, why do you expect other people to be so cognizant and so careful and so considerate about Jewish people? Yeah. What a nice bridge, making a PewDiePie N-word with a hard R joke. Why would even your fans that tune in for this kind of stuff ever be considerate about anti-Semitism at all? Like, do you not understand the energy that you're putting out? You're maybe getting a fraction of in return, while also simultaneously going to one of the few communities that doesn't entertain this shit at all for any group whatsoever. What do you mean? What the hell are you talking about? Used Google before? What do you mean? What the hell are you talking about? I know a lot of things are confusing to you. I'm saying, if you're being bigoted towards black people, towards trans people, why the fuck do you think people are not going to be bigoted towards Jewish people? Is it that difficult to comprehend? I'm saying you're playing a role in fomenting anti-Semitism. A lot of the anti-woke people that you have aligned with, that you feel like you're a part of this movement, despise you as a Jewish person, okay? There is no, we're going to do anti-woke for every group other than Jews. And that's precisely the reason why this anti-woke movement has now moved on to also declassifying Jews as white and are anti-Semitic. Pretty basic stuff. I know it's difficult to comprehend, but you're playing a role in this. You're also simultaneously coming to the community of a person who unironically does not play a role in this. I don't foment anti-Semitism. I separate Judaism from Zionism with regular frequency. And on top of that, I try to the best of my ability, combat all different kinds of bigotries, including anti-Semitism. If you're anti-Semitic, you're also anti-Zionist, which means you don't believe in the state of Israel. You say we're committing a genocide in Gaza, but that doesn't exist at all. Yes. It doesn't exist. It's all made up. Everyone's out to get you. And it's not because of your output, okay? You openly served in a terrorist army. You have not reflected on said service whatsoever. But a lot gets lost, I think, in your mind. And it's interesting to see this in real time. Like, people who make allegiances with like some of the most hateful, bigoted people and then cry about anti-Semitism. It's like, brother, you made this shit sandwich, you know? You made it. You made the sandwich. The walls are closing in. No politique here. Say you love Israel.
It's focused on building closer ties with Iran, Russia, and China, and keeping Venezuelan oil firmly under state control. Here's how he described U.S. President George W. Bush following his invasion of Iraq.
Para decírtelo en mi mal inglés, en mi bad English, you are a donkey, Mr. Danger. You are a donkey, Mr. Bush. Si algún día
Hugo Chavez, the lion that you are.
se te va a ocurrir la locura de invadir Venezuela,
Donkey.
te espero en esta sabana, Mr. Danger. Come on here, Mr. Danger.
So yeah, not a fan. The root of this tension came from Chavez's belief that the US had tried everything they could to topple him, starting with an attempted coup in 2002 where he was detained for 48 hours, to an alleged assassination attempt in 2005, to his accusation that US aid was funding opposition parties. When Chavez died and his deputy, Nicolas Maduro...
Not an accusation necessarily, but just, you know, real life. You can usually tell when it's American involvement because immediately after the implementation of the coup, before it like hits the fucking news outlets, America will automatically go, we recognize the new Venezuelan government. The people have spoken. The new Venezuelan government led by the Venezuelan Chamber of Commerce, you know, like before people even understand what the fuck took place, before the Venezuelans go, whoa, hold on. We're going to take up arms against this. This is unacceptable. The American government's out there being like, oh my God, I can't believe how much democracy just took place.
Took over in 2013, the US placed heavy sanctions on Venezuela, labeling it as a threat to national security. It said that Chavez and Maduro secretly fronted an international cartel called and used the army to facilitate...
I'm going to ask one last time to Nevin, why do you think you can be bigoted towards all these other groups, align yourself with all these other bigots, and assume that they're going to be woke about Jews for some fucking weird reason? Okay? Why have you not answered this question? I need you to answer this question. Oh, you got banned. Wait, no, you got unbanned. How is it a terrorist army? We announce every time before we strike? Okay, dude. Yeah. If Hamas had said we're doing October 7th beforehand, then it would have been fine, right? Is that what you're saying? Also, you don't even announce every time before you strike. I'm getting timed out every time I try to answer you, bro. Your Moz or something else? No, you're getting timed out because you keep using Zionist. And Zionist is a blocked term. Okay? That's why. Just stop using the term Zionist. And answer my question. Answer my question. Okay? Stop trying to move in all these different directions. You care about anti-Semitism. I care about anti-Semitism. You, on the other hand, have aligned yourself with a lot of anti-Semitic people, and you think I'm fomenting anti-Semitism. But my question to you is, if you are being bigoted towards all these other groups, why do you expect those guys to not be bigoted to you? Why do you expect your allies not to also be anti-Semitic? What is this position? Where is this attitude coming from? Where is this entitlement coming from? Why would the anti-woke crowd simply... Are you afraid of Zionists? Lol. No, dumbass. I already explained it to you, but you're too fucking dense. You do not understand. The reason why Zionist is a blocked term in the chat is because the ADL, in an effort to combat the anti-Semitic tendencies that we're fomenting on Twitch, made Zionists a violation of the terms of service. Okay? And we are complying. This is what you wanted, I assume, right? You don't care about anti-Semitism. You constantly spread lies about Israel. Chatter, answer my question. Why do you think all of the anti-woke movement, all of this anti-woke movement wasn't inevitably going to turn on Jews? Listen to my words, listen to my question, and answer it. Why do you think every single person that you've aligned with, we're going to be like, oh yeah, I love this anti-woke backlash. We're all anti-woke now. You know, fuck every other group except for Jews. Don't say anything about Jews. Why did you think that that was going to take place? Very difficult to penetrate the iron dome of the propagandized mind. This is an Israeli Asmongold chatter. They're cooked. Nazis loving Nazis, but they call you anti-Semitic. I know. I'm trying to understand this perspective. Okay? I'm trying to understand this perspective. You are not banned. I'm trying to understand your perspective. Because I think your mind is fascinating. Okay? Your mind is fascinating. You think I am an anti-Semitic op to you. Okay? This is not the case, but we're not going to get into my anti-Zionism and all that stuff. What I am more interested in is why you are orbiting the community of someone who openly talks about Nick Fuentes. We don't agree on much, but I think you and I both agree that Nick Fuentes hates Jews. Okay? Now, if we agree on that, and maybe we both agree on anti-Semitism being a form of bigotry. My question to you is, if you are being hateful towards black people, trans people, everybody else, if you're a part of this like anti-woke militia and movement, why the fuck do you think those guys are not going to turn around and be shitty to Jews? What makes you think that those guys are not also going to be, oh, now at least I've leveled up. I'm better than Nick Fuentes. Thank you. Well, Asmongold seems to love Nick Fuentes, and you love Asmongold, so I don't know how that works for you. But once again, you're not answering my question. Why do you think the anti-woke movement that you're part of was not going to inevitably shit on Jews as well? Answer my question, please. Also, Asmongold's pretty smart compared to you. At least he's not shocking his dog. Okay. You're still not answering my question. Okay? I don't know why it's so difficult for you to answer one question. How many times has it been now? Like 15? 20? Answer the question. I don't think you can answer it. Because I think deep down inside you might recognize that, you know, Hasan got absolutely owned, breathtaking content.
Ethan just owned Hasan. He dropped 2 videos that I absolutely have to show you. Let's roll the clip.
Just remember.
Bro, Israel is in fucking shambles, dude. These are the Hasbara operatives. These are my fucking ops, dog. What are we doing? I am from Israel. This is my culture. Oh, God. I am Israel's top general. This is my culture. All right, I'm done. We got to get back to some serious shit, okay?
facilitate drug trafficking to keep themselves in power. But does this cartel even exist? There's not much evidence to prove it. According to UN data, most of the drugs that are flowing through Venezuela don't end up in the US and mostly goes to Europe. For example, if you look at where cocaine is produced and transported into the US, it's being made in Colombia and Peru and transported through Mexico. In other words, it's the US's allies who are most responsible for its drug problems. Here's the thing though. Throughout this whole ordeal, Venezuela never stopped selling oil to the US. Why?
Because of the strong economic ties between Venezuela and the United States, including the refineries in the Gulf Coast of the United States that were dependent on receiving Venezuelan crude, which is a very specific type of crude, and their refineries were designed to process that very specific type of Venezuelan crude.
Whenever it needed access to crude, the US quietly gave licenses to American companies like Chevron, allowing them to bypass sanctions. Until 2023, the US was buying half of all Venezuela's oil exports, but Venezuela was also looking elsewhere for trade. And this is where China comes in. Back in 2001, China needed large amounts of crude oil to fuel its modernization project, and Hugo Chavez needed a buyer who wasn't threatening to impose sanctions. That year, Venezuela became the first Hispanic country to sign a major trade deal with China. A year later, the US tried to overthrow Chavez in a coup, and like I said, failed. The US increasingly saw Venezuela as part of a so-called troika of tyranny. With Cuba and Nicaragua, socialist governments with strong ties to China and Russia, and therefore threats to its interests in the region. But the more the US tried to isolate Venezuela, the more China stepped in to fill the gap. It gave Venezuelan dollars in state loans for housing projects and helped it build railways and ports. Its cargo ships figured out how to bypass US sanctions too, by turning their transponders off in Venezuelan waters. For Venezuela, crippled by corruption and a currency in free fall, China became a lifeline. For China, Venezuela became its entry point into Latin America and a key transport hub for its Belt and Road Initiative. Since then, China began to expand its influence really quickly. In Panama, it built bridges, high-speed rail, and ports along the Panama Canal. It's investing heavily.
Wait, what? I don't like that. I don't like that one. Bridges? High-speed rail? Excuse me. Don't you know you're not allowed to do that?
In the so-called lithium triangle, Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile, countries rich in the...
And before you say, they also help Bukele, I know, dog, it don't matter. These guys, when have I said that China has any sort of ideological investment in this? They are noticeably absent. They have a permanently agnostic position when it comes to dealing with every country, including America, okay? Every country. I think some of you mistake the things that I talk about when I talk about like the way that China operates around the world as like an overall positive, okay? No, they're trade maxing. The term I like to use is trade maxing. Above all, trade is what matters the most, okay? China would trade with Hitler's Germany, no cap. I mean, they're trading with Israel, so it's not that fucking far-fetched. And they trade with America too, so it's not like there is any sort of interest. Like at least with America, you could say it's a major market, right? Like they dominate the planet. It's virtually impossible to cut off all access to America, and it's an incredibly important position for China for their own survival. Fair is fair. That can be understandable. But as far as like trading with Israel goes, I mean, there is a lot of opportunity there to greatly influence both Israel and every other country by punishing Israel. It's good for Chinese goals in the region. It's good for it's obviously good for hoping to put a dent in Israel's genocidal ambition in Gaza. But it's not happening. It's not happening at all because they're fucking trade maxing. China figures if they can make everyone dependent upon trade, they benefit, so they logically trade with everyone. For sure.
Mineral vital for China's growing electric car industry. More than 20 Latin American countries have signed up for the Belt and Road Initiative, most recently Colombia. In 2024, China signed free trade deals with Chile, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Nicaragua, and Peru. And in May 2025, hosted regional leaders in Beijing. And
why is the burden on China to be the moral police of the world, though? They work for their own people. Brother, what are you talking about? I mean, come on, dude. Are we being serious right now? I hate this fucking cope from American China glazers as well, where it's like, oh, well, you know, like, think about it from the perspective of America, okay? Why is it America's business to be the world police? Like, it's fucking ridiculous. And it's also unironically beneficial for China to offer some shroud of protection to these other countries in the region that they actually that actually offer them oil, for example. It is beneficial for China to promote stability and therefore go against American intervention, both in Venezuela and in Iran, and also in Israel as well. If they want a trade max and they want global stability, they have to, at some points, push back against the number one instability guy in the entire planet, which is the United States of America. It's not about becoming the fucking global police or being the most moral force on the planet. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Announcing a $9 billion investment line of credit, but by far its biggest partnership.
Basically, China as it stands, relies on how horrible America is to all of its allies and all of its enemies alike. And that's the reason why they can get away with just like being a shitty partner or being an ally when the country is not under fire. Okay? Because the alternative is always America. That's what they are getting away with. It's the bottom of the barrel.
Region has been with Brazil, a key member of the BRICS economic alliance of 10 countries. The expanding economic partnership wants a new currency for international trade, much to the horror of the US. And while Brazil has downplayed this in recent months, it's made it clear it doesn't want to be, quote, fully dependent on the dollar.
You wouldn't have the dollar as your currency anymore. You wouldn't have a world domination by the dollar if I didn't win this election. BRICS was an attack on the dollar.
When Donald Trump first took office in 2016, he had China in his scopes, accusing it of taking advantage of US weakness on the world stage and promoting the spread of drugs past its borders. He then hiked sanctions on Venezuela and fostered ties with right-wing leaders in Brazil, Argentina, and El Salvador. When Joe Biden replaced him in 2020, containing China's rapid growth was high on his agenda. But despite his attempts at limiting its access to vital minerals and semiconductors, the regional shift was only going in one direction. Probably the most telling moment was in November 2024, during the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum in Peru. President Joe Biden had gone to reassert the close ties between neighbors in the Americas, but during the forum, China inaugurated a $3.5 billion deepwater megaport just outside the capital, Lima. During a group photo to conclude the summit, China's Xi Jinping was placed front to Peru's president, and Biden was, well, all the way back here. Ouch. By the time Trump returned to office in 2025, he was convinced something more drastic had to be done. His Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, had long advocated for a more hawkish approach in Latin America and believed the spread of China and its socialist influences was the primary threat to U.S. interests.
The Communist Party of China leads PRC, is the most potent and dangerous near-peer adversary this nation has ever confronted. They have elements that the Soviet Union never possessed. They are a technological adversary and competitor, an industrial competitor, an economic competitor, a geopolitical competitor, a scientific competitor now, in every realm. The Chinese believe that the United States are a great power in inevitable decline and that they are an inevitable rise.
Rubio began his tenure with a long tour of the region, the first time a U.S. Secretary of State had done this since 1912, making it clear that Trump's America First policy was also an America's First policy, and that he expected his neighbors to reciprocate. Their first target was Panama.
And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back.
Panama's government hit back, saying its canal wasn't up for grabs, and that it wanted no part in the US-China rivalry. But just 2 weeks later, it was forced to drop out of the Belt and Road Initiative and allow US investment company BlackRock to acquire the Panama Ports Company, which China is now trying to block with its own bid. Then in April, the US deployed troops near the canal for military training exercises, and the message couldn't be more obvious.
China did not build this canal. China does not operate this canal.
and China will not weaponize this canal.
In July, the U.S. slapped a 40% tariff on...
I'm going to be honest, I think China believes, for very good reason too, that if the U.S. gets bogged down for another 10 years in a war, this time so close to the U.S. too, is pretty much only positive for China. Yeah, I mean, sure, everything that America is doing is accelerating towards America's demise. And that is the gamble that China is making.
Brazilian goods in response to the jailing of the country's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, a Trump ally and a vocal critic of China. In September, Rubio placed visa restrictions on Central American nationals accused of acting on...
I think the difference is that there wouldn't be... Like, Vietnam would not exist if it wasn't backed by one of the two poles, right? When it was being invaded and dominated by Americans, like, I'm sorry, the ingenuity of the Viet Cong goes a long way, but the reality of the matter is Vietnam would not be a sovereign nation right now, or at least wouldn't be as developed as it is right now. It probably would have taken even longer. It could have had a South Korea, North Korea style formation, right? Like, the point I'm trying to make is that you do need to push and pull at certain points. So this non-interventionist policy, this non-interventionist, no ideology whatsoever attitude that China has, I think does not benefit them in the long run. Sometimes it's all right to tilt the scales a little bit or to stop further collapse from taking place for an important ally that has allowed you to gain foothold in this entire continent. So some imperialism is good. It's imperialism when you arm the fucking a domestic population with defensive weapons against an actual imperialist superpower slated to destroy your country. What are you talking about? What do words mean? The USSR was doing imperialism by fucking offering supplies to the Vietnamese forces that were fighting against yet another colonial superpower trying to invade and destroy the country, developing a puppet state in the South and engaging in wholesale slaughter. That's what the USSR was doing. Imperialism in Vietnam. That's crazy. Is the reason China's not stopping trade with Israel solely because they think it would antagonize the US? I think they're just profiting off of everything. But you are inherently at an informational disadvantage compared to the decision makers in China. They made it this far. Maybe they know what they're doing. Maybe cold wars and interventions are what led to downfalls. I think the reason why they behave the way that they do is, what is this? Don't you think your imperialism critiques sometimes lean too hard on U.S. hypocrisy without addressing how some global South leaders also reproduce internal class domination? Anti-imperialism isn't the same as defending every regime, right? Yes, you're right. I actually am very mad. You're right. You know who is the main villain in this story? Maduro, which of course leaves only one other solution: the immediate implementation of puppet leadership. Maybe it's because I don't want countries to be punished by the largest, most consequential imperial force on the planet for not being sufficiently woke enough or socialist enough in their domestic affairs, partially because I also factor in decades of intervention that makes it virtually impossible for any sort of like popular revolution to take place in these countries.
Behalf of the Chinese government, which he said was a corrupt influence on the region. And then there's Argentina. President Javier Milei had publicly rejected an offer to join BRICS in 2023, vying for closer ties to the US. But facing an economic crisis and spiraling inflation, he accepted a $5 billion currency swap with Beijing in April 2025. By October, the US stepped in, offering Argentina a $20 billion loan, but only if Milei remained in power. Days later, Milei won a landslide election victory.
Argentina, I want to congratulate the victor, and he was a big victor, and he had a lot of help from us.
By now, the US Navy had become a dominant presence in the Caribbean, escalating attacks on boats alleged to be transporting drugs from Venezuela. International drug cartels were designated as terror organizations, and a $50 million bounty was placed on Nicolas Maduro's head.
CIA have authority to take out Maduro?
Oh, I don't want to answer
Hasan,
a question
please,
like that.
Hasan, please answer this question for me. Where does your moral compass come from, and how fickle are your morals? Empathy first politics. Do unto others, do unto yourself, done to yourself.
Ridiculous question for me to be given. Not really a ridiculous question, but wouldn't it be a ridiculous question for me to answer? But I think Venezuela is feeling heat, but I think a lot of other countries are feeling heat too.
Now, here's what's interesting. In the background of this military escalation, Maduro tried to appease Trump, offering to open up all existing and future oil and gold projects to American companies and reverse the flow of Venezuelan oil exports from China. And initially, the US president considered the offer, but it was Marco Rubio that pushed him to reject it. Rubio firmly believed that the socialist leaders in the region relied on each other politically and economically, and that toppling Maduro would lead to the collapse of Nicaragua and Cuba. Instead, the US could get more favorable trade deals with a capitalist in charge, like Venezuela's opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, who's currently in hiding.
Forget about the Saudis. I mean, we have more oil. I mean, infinite potential. And we're going to open markets. We're going to kick off the government from the oil sector. We are going to privatize all our industry. Venezuela has huge resources. Oil, gas, minerals.
Put some respect on her name. That is Machado, the female Juan Guaido, Nobel Peace Prize winner, Maria Corina Machado.
Land, technology.
On October 6, the US cut all diplomatic communication with Venezuela, seemingly ending any hope of de-escalating the situation. Maduro had little choice but to plead with Trump in public.
Donald Trump, usted tiene que cuidarse que Marco Rubio quiere manchar sus manos de sangre, sangre suramericana, caribeña, con sangre venezolana. Lo quieren llevar a un baño de sangre y que su apellido, Trump, se manche de sangre por los siglos de los siglos.
Backed into a corner, Maduro turned to China and Russia for help. Internal US documents appear to show letters from Maduro to Xi Jinping asking,
is it appropriate to say the US government wants Venezuela the next Afghanistan in terms of stealing resources? How long until they claim Venezuela has a WMD? It's more so like Iraq, and also they already have moved to classify fentanyl as a WMD, while simultaneously lying about Venezuela being a major drug trafficking hub for fentanyl coming into the United States of America, which is a lie already. So yeah, the new WMD is fentanyl.
For expanded military cooperation and radar detection systems. But despite issuing strong statements condemning US military escalations, China seems reluctant to involve itself directly. Having already invested so much into the country, could it now decide to cut its losses?
China did not throw fresh money at Venezuela, right? They were already had loaned Venezuela quite a bit, and Venezuela was back their loans, and Venezuela has defaulted on most of their debt. But Venezuela did start making oil payments to China to service some of that debt.
Even if Trump succeeds with his military aims, it could have lasting repercussions. Trump's MAGA base elected him on an anti-war platform.
Cap, they don't give a shit. They'll say, yeah, based.
And held him back from escalating a military confrontation with Iran in June.
They won't see the impact of this unless it harms their treats and unless their relatives come back in body bags, okay? That's it. The American mind, when it comes to foreign policy, the American system is designed, the media infrastructure is specifically designed to shelter Americans from the actual consequences of whatever kind of military adventurism we're engaging in are all around the globe. Okay, so in that, there's a reason why American imperial conquest takes 20 fucking years to come to a close, and oftentimes ends with a massive failure in general. And then people go, "Oh, how did we get here?" And then the next time this kind of ambition is brought back into the forefront, everybody goes, "This time it'll be different. This time is valid." Now we're not even doing that. We're not even really like, it doesn't feel like the propaganda arm is even all that invested in it. It doesn't feel like we have our heart in it this time around. We're not like even making enough shit up. There is no multifaceted, multi-front approach to manufacturer consent even. There's no passion in it. And seemingly a lot of Americans are just like, I don't know. The fuck do I care about whether or not we blow up Venezuelan fisher boats or if we like invade Venezuela or not? I don't want it. But if it happens, it happens. You know, that is what it feels like. Because everything is on everything is on autopilot. That's what it feels like to me. Feels like everything is just on autopilot. It's just, you know, things are going to go the way that they're going to go. And there's not really anything that you can say or do to stop it. And you're too busy trying to make sure you survive. And you're too invested in whatever slop is thrown your way. And you can sedate yourself with the treats that are readily available. Now, if the treats are called into question, if your treats are threatened, you might have a very different attitude, right? If they're no longer as accessible, now then you might start getting mad. Will you tie it back to this dying empire and its last breath of violence? I don't know, but then there will be some instability.
And while Trump made a public display of deporting Venezuelan migrants, the collapse of the government could lead to an unprecedented new wave of migration towards the US border. What this apparent march to war has done is put the whole of Latin America on edge.
It does raise questions. Is the administration planning to take these kinds of actions in other countries where there are foreign terrorist organizations that are involved in drug trafficking? And that includes some of our closest partners in the region, and what the economic and political fallout of that could be. If the U.S. government is going to partners in Latin America and asking them to cut back on the relationship with China, one of the big questions is going to be, well, what is the U.S. government bringing to the table?
As China considers how to protect its interests in the region while avoiding a direct confrontation with its rival, it could decide that its best strategy is to sit back and hope the US is making a terrible mistake.
Great stuff.